A bright idea in learning and development is on its way. Learning Now TV. Coming soon.
And a very good morning, good evening, or good afternoon to you, wherever you're watching in the world today. Welcome to Learning Now TV.
So close yet far apart, we live at hyperspeed, communicating all the time. But do they know what's on your heart or on your mind? Another Friday night spent online, it's really taking up all your time. Get out, go see, be free, or are you just too busy to give yourself to me? I'll give myself to you. Let's share our life. share your life with me. I'll share my life with you. That's just what we should do. Give yourself to me. Give myself to you. Give yourself to me. I give myself to you. I know just where you are, know where you're going to be, but I don't know how you feel. Your Facebook profile says you're single once again, but where are you now that I'm in need? Another Friday night spent online, it's really taking up all your time.
Let's take a look at what's coming up on tonight's programme.
It's now time for this month's broadcast of Learning Now TV.
Welcome. It's August, it's 8 months into the year, and welcome to another edition of Learning Now TV. Nigel, tell us what delights we've got on the show this month.
Right to say delights. Indeed we have delights. The first delight is Laura Emerson. Laura is the finalist for the Rising Star Awards at the Learning Awards, and you'll see why she was a finalist. Full of great, great ideas. And next we've got Neil Hutton. He founded Uptick Learning, and we're going to have a good talk about what adult learning is all about and how to make learning effective. And finally, Martin Cousins is back, telling us to read and helping us know why we should look at another research report. So,
welcome to the show.
we managed to pull Neil Hutton, extract him down from Scotland to talk to us in the Learning Now TV studio. Neil is the head of learning and development for Uptick Training, and I want to focus my conversation with him on what he should be doing, learning and development. So Neil, what is either the philosophy of the company or your own personal philosophy about adult learning? Because it's kind of out of the ordinary for companies like yourselves, I think. Anyway, my view. What about you? Tell me your philosophy.
Yeah, so my background is in working with young people originally, and that's where I learned really to think about participatory learning. And so everything that Uptick does is all about how do we interact with people and get people engaged in taking ownership of their own learning.
Yeah, you talked about creating quality experiences.
Yeah, learning experiences, yes. That's what it's all about.
Not courses, learning experiences.
Yeah.
I think you're actually on a curve here. I think it's an upward curve. Lots of people are starting to talk about that. Tell me what that means. For someone who's going, what's a learning experience? I know about courses. What is a learning experience?
People talk about learning experiences. This is a term that's been around for a long time, so it does mean, like everything in L&D, different things to different people. And so it does get mistaken with that idea that it's making things fun, just having activities of some sort. And it can be that, and it is fun, but really it's about tapping into the way that people really learn. That we know that people need to have a social element in learning, that the context in which they're learning this thing matters. So it's situated, is what we'd call it. So participatory learning is about exploiting those natural processes of we learn from each other and the doing of something to experiment with it, and that the context in which I've learned it will determine what I've learned and how well I understand it really.
So let me just be the daft laddie. I come into you saying we've got a wonderful portfolio of courses, Neil. We're not quite sure that it's working as well as it should do.
No, it's going terribly, I can tell.
Right. How would you engage that person, and how would you start that process of shifting away from a course and catalogue mentality, an order-taking mentality, to generating participatory learning and building great learning experiences?
That's quite a lot of what I do, is trying to interact how to incorporate what we do with existing programs. So it's not necessarily wrong to have a course and to have bits of information that you're giving to people. That's not wrong.
Shouldn't be all, though.
But it's not all, and that's not the same as understanding something. Giving someone the information and giving them access to that information really quickly and making that available to them, that's great, and we do need to do that. But that's different to what I think of as learning. And what we do with that information, how do we actually apply that? And what do I understand by that information and those skills? That's where I would come in, and I would want to be looking at how do we get people getting meaning from whatever it is you're trying to have them learn.
Okay, you say that meaning is really key. You are essentially getting someone to reframe how they conceive of learning.
Yes.
And start at the end of meaning and the end of impact, not on the end of how can we build a great course. Is that
Absolutely
right?
Absolutely that. So it's about the outcome for each individual person in that room. When we make a course, we're usually looking at benchmarking outcomes. Has everyone hit whatever benchmark that we're kind of looking at, right? And we might differentiate that where we've got kind of easy, medium and hard along there or whatever. But when we're looking at something participatory, so we're looking at behaviours, attitudes, beliefs, changing the way that people actually operate, it's less about those benchmarked outcomes, and it's about those individualized outcomes. We're trying to move everybody, wherever they're starting, up a notch.
Not everyone to the same level.
Absolutely.
From whatever level, because that doesn't work. So it's about
impossible.
personalisation.
It absolutely is. And that happens not because of what I tell you.
It's what I take from it. It's on my, as a learner.
What do I trigger inside you
Exactly.
when you make those connections totally for yourself? And that gives autonomy.
Yes.
That's what lets people, because a big problem with courses is that people go back to work having gone, that was really interesting. And then they just go back to work exactly as they did before.
The waters
and that's that.
Close over.
Yeah, the door's closed and it's over there. And that's context-dependent learning right there. If you put them back in that same room and put that same trainer at the front, they'll remember some stuff, but they won't apply it in their actual day-to-day lives.
Now, let's just pull it down to practical things. What do you actually do to help that personalization process, help the contextualization process, and help the focus on meaning? What would you do? Is it a case of having conversations? Is it reconfiguring something on behalf of someone else? How do you do that?
Yeah, it's usually going down to something very fundamentally human about it. Conversations are like the most super accessible way to start thinking about this. Having two people sitting next to each other, pose a question and have them chat about it.
Yeah.
The biggest mistake anyone can make is to sort of ask a question to the whole group and get like a hands up type response, right? If you just pair people up, pair and share, you're already moving towards people taking ownership of that. So I do tons of that. Two big structures that I use are around using actors. So it's about performances and interacting with actors, forum theatre. And the other big structure I use is Lego Serious Play. Which is about a making process that makes that internalized thinking time that people need to process stuff. It's put into kind of a making process. So it's about interacting on some human level and getting that emotional connection to generate that meaning for themselves.
So do you say to someone, let me have a go at re-engineering this, and we'll try to get better outcomes, and we'll try to get better outcomes doing it in a completely different way? Is that how you approach the thing? You try to get better outcomes by re-engineering, or is it all about rethinking? So how does it work? What do you start with? Is it the thinking, or is it about, look, if we made this more conversational, if we created this forum with actors so that we can interact with those people and see the reality that we're trying to overcome? How do you...
The very first thing is trying to diagnose or assess what do we actually want the outcome to be?
Yes.
Because it's all indirect. That's the art to it, is understanding that with humans you can't get from A to B.
Yes.
You have to go this indirect route.
And they have to discover it rather than be told
They've got to. That's the classic. That's the Piaget golden rule, isn't it? They've got to discover it for themselves. You're robbing them of this golden moment of revelation if I just tell you it.
Yes, it's true.
And they're going to be suspicious of it as well. That's the big thing. And I have that when I go into so many places, just as this like, hey, hi guys, we're going to do some learning. And people are quite suspicious and wary of what's about to kind of happen. And that's always a red flag, I think, that people see training as being, is this a waste of my time, or is this something that I'm not really going to be into?
Is this something that gets in the way of me getting my bonus? It's more than just, is it a waste of time? This is actually, actively, I hate learning. It's a positive thing, not a negative thing.
Well, and I think that's a really key thing that you've put your finger on there, is that learning for everyone is an uncomfortable experience fundamentally. I think we forget that, and I have to remind myself of that. When you're the person standing at the front of the room and you've got control over this whole thing, you're making the magic happen, it's really easy to forget that the people in that room are actually potentially quite anxious and that they're uncomfortable because you're exposing what they can't do. So a big part of making it participatory is taking away that judgment, that sense that you're meant to be up here or you're meant to be there, that there's this expectation of a right or wrong answer, that it has to be an open exploration of what's going on. So you've got one part of your mind that's thinking about your client and what they're wanting to get out of it, and then you're kind of putting that on a shelf. And then when you're in the room, you're thinking about these individuals and how they can discover things and share that, so that you're not saying that's wrong because your boss says, I need you to think this. And that's a complex thing. And that's where structures like using actors who can take on any role you want and can confront you in a way that people actually enjoy. And Lego and making and thinking about things that way allows for that same kind of process, that indirect exploration of something.
And also getting lost in something.
Totally. That flow concept,
Yes.
massive. It's so interesting, particularly with actors, how many people at the end of the session say, I completely forgot they were actors. There's no pretense. They might not even be in a costume or anything, but their brain isn't computing that bit. They're so engrossed in the learning that there's no brain left over to be like, they're actors. I totally forgot that they were.
Who do they think they are? Oh, I can see through that. You're absolutely right.
It completely disappears. You're completely in it.
And that is an intense learning experience when you're
Yes.
caught in the moment.
Everybody learning all of the time.
Yes.
That's my mantra.
So let's just get some tips. Not every organisation, not every company can come and talk to Uptick Training. Ideally, that would be the result, but
Of course,
it's not going to happen.
Very
so.
affordable and happy to talk.
What would be the 3 tips that you want everybody who's watching this to take away, who are not at that position where they're still delivering their courses and delivering their catalogues every year? What were the 3 key things that you want them to do?
I love it. I love the pressure of the 3, the golden 3. I'll give you 4. Okay. So I think the number 1 thing is remembering that human element and understanding what humans need to do well. Within that, remembering that people are potentially anxious in learning experiences. So that idea of making something fun, that can seem superficial, but actually building rapport, making it enjoyable, that's a very important thing to do. When you relax and confident, you will always learn more. Strong emotion stops us from learning. We know that. So it's not frivolous to make something engaging and enjoyable and relaxing in there. The very basic thing of understanding what you're trying to get at the end of it, because I think a difficulty that people have when they start to think about participatory learning, and particularly using things like Lego, people dabble in that kind of stuff. It keeps at that surface level. And I think remembering what you're trying to actually get out of this experience, what's the outcome, and keeping that artful split in your mind of what you want them to get out of it, and letting them discover what they actually need from the experience as well. So remembering those human elements, the emotional element that's in it for them, and keeping that balance of what you want and what they actually need isn't necessarily all the same thing. So stay open to what they need and respond to it. Participatory learning isn't about them participating in something with me over here. It's reciprocal. I'm learning as much about them and what they are needing and are interested in as much as anything. So it's reciprocal. And that's how you build trust, your favourite thing. That trust comes from, I don't know everything. I say that all the time. That's probably my 4th thing, is you're not the fount of all knowledge. And as soon as you say to people, I don't know everything, and often I'm going into spaces where people know lots more about their specialism than I do. If I'm going into someone who fixes trains, I know nothing about trains. So I'm not going to pretend that I know that. They know way more about that. So I'm going to help you discover all these other things.
So relaxed people who have got, the people organising have got a very clear idea of what they want them to get out of it. Yeah. But it's based on individuals taking what they need in an informed, engaged and constantly interacting way.
Yeah.
That is the message.
Celebrating it.
Celebrating
Not just
learning.
Tolerating, I didn't get what I wanted.
Celebrating.
What they got from it is great. It's always great.
Let's end on that word, celebrating learning. So it's been really engaging, participative and conversational interacting with you today. So Neil Hutton, a real pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
We've got Ewan Semple this month talking about why is it that in the workplace the notion of using technology eludes us, the degree to which we can use channels such as YouTube and other things to kind of help us, but yet why is it that we don't use those same principles in the workplace?
Hi there. I thought this time round I'd talk about internet technologies and how we use them and how we have adopted them in our day-to-day lives. The fact that I used my phone all the time when we've just been on holiday in Italy to find out where we were going, checking on various bookings that we'd made. But also, at one point I was walking along the beach and swimming trunks and thinking, I can't take my phone with me. I want to listen to podcasts, and then remembered that I could transfer the podcasts onto my watch and listen to them on my AirPods. So, even in those, in some sense, extreme circumstances, it's quite possible to use technology really easily these days to learn, and to learn in all sorts of ways, to read documents, to exchange information with each other, or to access pre-made media of various sorts. And this has been the case for some of us 20 plus years, and it's just become a way of life. It's normal. The way you learn about how to fix something on your car is to look it up on YouTube, or with my driving and the truck driving, I'll go onto forums to ask questions about various bits of legislation or practical things that I need to try and find out about. So we have that experience, many of us. I mean, I think not everybody, and clearly there are a lot of people who frankly haven't tapped into that potential of the internet. They're still very much in a consumption mode. But I think most people nowadays will have had some experience of going onto the internet to find stuff out. And yet it is still relatively unknown at work. I mean, it's just not something that people seem to think of as normal at work. And it's still difficult at work. There are still many organizations that will have all sorts of good reasons why you can't access YouTube from the work network. There'll be, constraints about whether you can access Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever else. And there's still this perception that using those tools is wasting time, and that, you're there to work, you're not there to play, as it were. And yet, as a consequence, we just make it so ridiculously difficult to learn in the workplace. And, I began to wonder why this is. Why is it so difficult? Why do organizations still resist allowing people to do this? And why do people show little inclination to do it? I mean, why is there not more pressure to be able to do this? Why is there not more breaking of rules, frankly, in order to be able to access this kind of information? And I'm more and more convinced that I think it's about being passive. I think a lot of people still go to work to have a safe income, to not necessarily to rattle cages, or to grow or to learn, or and in fact I quite often get people pushing back against me, saying that I'm unreasonable in my expectations of people thinking, and especially thinking at work. And it just befuddles me that that's an attitude, that lack of inclination to think about things or to learn about things should be seen as a positive and a way to be. And I think the great sadness is that it's about, or appears to be about, a lack of curiosity and a lack of willingness to tinker and to play. And I'm sure I've touched on this in terms of people's understanding of how to use technology, but I think it's also just indicative of a lack of curiosity about the world and about life and about how things work and why they don't work, perhaps more importantly. And that seems to be something that's just difficult at work. But I think we could make it easier. And I think encouraging discovery, encouraging responsibility for learning, and giving people the opportunities and the access to the tools is obviously important. But I think that whole thing of self-help, and I don't mean self-directed training, because that sort of became a thing, and it was overly structured, and it became really, in some cases, just dumping the responsibility on the staff member. But that's not really what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a general culture of curiosity, a culture of learning, a culture of willingness to try different things. And I think that's very much something that can be led by the L&D community, that sort of attitude, being able to see people operating in that way, being able to see people being flexible, tinkering, learning, talking about what they're learning about, and sharing their learning is the most encouraging and positive way to help other people to follow that example. So I think we could do so much more than we are currently, and have a lot of fun doing it.
Whoever you are, wherever you're from, you can network with professionals and experts on the award-winning DPG community.
You can choose to look at articles, videos, podcasts. You can look at comments that people have made. I find it my first stop when I'm thinking about L&D. If I have a question or I want to learn more, that's the first place I go.
Just head online and search for DPG community and sign up free today.
I'm delighted that we have Laura Emerson in the studio.
Hi.
Welcome to Berkshire. Welcome to Learning Now TV set.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here.
So for those that don't know, the Rising Star Awards was relatively new. I think it's only the second or third year in.
Yeah.
Can you remember the characteristics from that to kind of share with others?
So, yeah. So, as I mentioned, so I've come from a different background and had only been, I guess, within a learning and development environment for a couple of years at that point. So I kind of just happened to fall into it. I started out within a HR team in kind of the recruitment side of things, and then actually a position in learning and development came up as the administrator. And so I moved into that and quickly began to realise that actually my skills were fairly transferable. So I have a performing background. So I realised that actually I could utilise that and be, I guess, confident in talking to people and that kind of facilitation element. So within like a year, I'd moved into a coordinator position. And I guess was running and leading some of our initiatives. So I went and got trained in insights discovery and was running and leading those sessions and still am now. What else was I doing? I guess bespoke team development. And I was quite fortunate in that I guess I've kind of built the relationships with people through the business that it was nice when, or is still nice when, you know, people ask for you to be able to design something and work with the team, which is, I guess, where I've got to. And that's really, I guess, awesome just to have built those relationships. I lead on a lot of, and did then as well, our team communication. So a lot of things that come out from our team have my face on it or a nice video for people to watch to kind of introduce what we're doing and really try and drive that engagement, I think, with learning opportunities. Yeah, I think that covers it.
So I'm interested to know, before you came into L&D, what was your thoughts about the function?
Yeah.
And is that the same now? What sort of bias did you have about learning as a function?
I think I thought and knew that it was about training. I guess if we gave it its very basic, kind of what I knew then being, I guess, 6 years ago, being younger. But actually, I guess what I was quickly opened up to was that it's not just about that kind of face-to-face training environment, that actually there are lots of different opportunities for people to learn. And I guess it's broader than that, even in thinking about how you design something with key stakeholders, thinking about what it is that they want to be different at the outcome. So really understanding that. I guess one of the things that is still a challenge, I think, for learning and development professionals is that return on investment piece. So that kind of broadening and trying to understand and think about how what it is that we do can really be seen, in output, I guess. So, it's become much broader than just that training initial piece that I guess I thought it was.
So this may sound like a scary question to you because I was the judge for those that are not aware. And so this is the question that I asked you at the time. So what do you see as your biggest challenge and what are you doing proactively to try and address that?
Good question. I think for me, it's about, I think sometimes when, especially in this role now, I think you can design something bespoke for a team and they think they know what especially in, I guess, my role, they think they know what they'd like the output to be. But is that really what it is? Have they really understood actually what's going on in the environment that they're working in? So I guess trying to ask those probing questions and ask the right questions to be able to get them to think broader, deeper. So I think that's a challenge. And I guess being able to try and influence and change their perspective potentially on what they think that is. And then, again, as I mentioned, I think the return on investment piece. And also, this is very much true in our organisation, and because it's my only experience, I assume that it is elsewhere, but in getting people to see, the value add and take that time away from their day jobs to think about how they want to develop, because you know what it's like, we get so engrossed in what we do, but how can we get people to think a little bit differently about how they learn?
So for me, you just kind of reinforced, why you were put forward for Rising Star. You're probing and asking questions that actually any of us, irrespective of the length of time that we've been worked in L&D, should be asking, and carry on doing some great stuff. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Pitching our leadership course recently, the response was, we get it. You're not about teaching a few leadership techniques, you're about transforming the organisation. And that's right. Imagine an organisation where people are energised and motivated by being in control of what they do. Imagine they're trusted and given freedom to absolutely work at their best. Imagine they have managers who coach them rather than tell them what to do. Wouldn't you like to work in that environment? That's what we can help you create through our leadership programs to develop the skills, and through our consultancy to help you with your processes and the things you need to change. That's happy. We can help you create a truly happy, productive workplace.
I'd like to welcome Martin Cousins back to share another recent research report of interest to L&D. And this is one we talked about last year, but that was the 2018 version. It's Internet Trends by Mary Meeker, 2019, launched on June the 11th at the Code Conference. And Mary Meeker does not do things by halves. This is a 300 slide report, and I promise you, dear viewer, are not going to go through all 300. So Martin, out of all of the stuff that is in Mary Meeker's Internet Trends report, what would you highlight for us to look at and talk about?
So where's that needle in this haystack of data? It's an absolutely fantastic resource.
It's all data, isn't it?
Yeah, I'd encourage.
All data.
So it looks at internet growth and penetration, commerce, advertising, education, the changing world of work. It has a whole section on China. It really is. I would encourage anyone to dip into it, because it will give you the data that you probably need in a presentation or a discussion on what's happening on the web. So it's really good for that. But I've just come to a couple of things where around education, actually, because I think that's probably informing a lot of workplaces increasingly. So what are the trends there? So she was looking at education platforms. And Coursera, who does massive open online courses, been around a while now, but just from 2015 to 2018 went from 20 million to 40 million learners. So it's still really popular. Now I don't know if the zeitgeist in L&D is that MOOCs are passé, but basically there's a huge demand for this.
Yes, just as L&D says it's passé, the world discovers MOOCs.
It's the context in which organisations are operating. Yes. There's a massive demand for courses that are on those platforms, right? So then you've got education marketplaces like Udemy. So, instructors can load up their content. And that's grown from 15 to 30 million users over the last 3 years as well. So that, again, it's like huge demand. Your employees they're going to these places.
It's driven by employees.
They are doing this.
It's not driven by L&D.
Yeah, and she makes the point that there's just a massive, there's more growth, more users and more choice, and it's lower cost.
Yes.
So you can access all this stuff, you can get qualified, you can gain skills in data science or whatever it is, at a low cost. You can do all that. You don't need to go to work to do that. You can do that yourself.
The other interesting point that they make is that if you pay for the diploma, so you pay to have your learning validated, completion rates soar. So the idea that MOOCs, only 1% of people complete them is rubbish. Something over 50% of people end up with their certificate. In other words, they've not only completed the program, they've learnt quite a lot in order to get the award. And that is becoming the way forward. A, it generates income for Coursera, and B, for the employer, the employer knows that someone has done some work because they've got a validated piece of paper that says they've done some work. So that's the trend, isn't it? It's driven by the individual, validated by the organisation.
Yeah, I think there are caveats around this because Coursera is a very large MOOC provider. And it's a shifting sands with those MOOC providers in terms of their business models, and it's not all a numbers game. But it's interesting that for Coursera, 4% of non-paying learners who are doing non-degree courses, the completion rate is 4% for those, and that goes up to completion rate of 89% for people that are paying to do a degree on Coursera. So so it's not to say it's not an effective learning platform is rubbish. It's about motivation and drive. I think that's it's not something fundamentally wrong with the platform, which is what people have been saying. But it's all the devil is always in the detail. You can't just cast that aside.
No, I completely agree.
And Coursera is not the only. So many universities are making their programs available at free or low cost. If you want it, it's there. I mean, and that's quite interesting relative to what the role of learning is in an organisation. That's the point here. The other thing is YouTube. It just, I think it's just worth saying. We all know this to be true, but 4.5 billion hours a year of how-to video is consumed. I mean, it's just the numbers that just sort of make you want to fall over.
It's extraordinary.
But it's how-to videos. It's where stuff, well, we know it, everyone says it, but it's huge. 200 million views of booktuber content and 50... Now, I don't like getting into the generational stereotype stuff, but she says it, not me, but I'll regurgitate it. But 59% of Gen Z cites YouTube as a preferred learning tool. Now, I think for that, you could just say that a lot of people would probably say that YouTube was an important learning tool for them, whatever generation. But, it's quite interesting that, obviously, younger people have grown up with it, use it, a lot more.
Yes.
So
I don't know anyone who hasn't learnt to do something through YouTube.
Yeah,
everybody does.
That's I mean, that is the kind of YouTube trope here.
Yes,
is that we all, how did you fix your toilet? You use YouTube, blah blah blah. That gets wheeled out all the time at conferences. The point is that what does that mean for organisational learning? In terms of content and what's delivered and how it's delivered. That's the question. And I think that's what this report is good for. It's good for that sort of challenge around what the offer is for organisational learning.
Yes.
The other thing...
It's showing a kind of generic trend which L&D, formal organisational learning, has to ride, I would have thought. Or they're being naive, really. Because they're pushing against an open door.
The other thing that I think is really interesting, a couple of things. Firstly, images and video, right?
Yes.
They're massive, absolutely massive. So image sharing, not image, taking images is going on a sort of steady increase over the years. But sharing images, because of services like Instagram, have got like a hockey stick growth. So the web is such a visual place.
Yes.
So video is huge, images are huge. What does that mean for content?
Yes.
Second thing is there's a whole chapter in this report on China, and I'd really encourage people to go and look at what is going on there, because it's just phenomenal in terms of what retail looks like. Live streaming retail, there's total transparency around retail, and you've got influencers coming in. Just if you don't know the Chinese market, I would just have a look at that, because that's happening in the world. You might be looking through your world through the context of where you are in the world, But I would really encourage viewers to look at that China
look at
chapter.
alternatives,
Yeah.
or even look at the way the future might start to pan out.
Yeah.
And you'd be crazy not to do that. Martin, thank you. So we've left only 298 other pages of fascinating data for people to look at on their own. There's an awful lot in this report, and it should be sitting on your... You don't have to read it all in one go, but as a reference point, it's well researched, the information is presented very clearly, and it's full of oodles and oodles of data.
Yeah.
Always worth looking at.
Yeah.
Martin, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Pleasure to talk to you.
In the L&D world, we all know our biggest challenge is knowledge fade and demonstrating ROI from our training interventions. At Elephants Don't Forget, we use artificial intelligence to guarantee that what you train your employees, they learn and retain. If you are looking to transform the impact your training content has in your business, improve the ROI, and perhaps help employees learn and retain even the dull regulatory material, drop me a line at nelly@elephantsdon'tforget.com.
Part 2 of Robin Hoyle's focus on evidence-based research. And this time he's looking at how some of the insights from the past, if we go back and look at them from those origins, give us new ideas and new insights for the future. This is very important material.
Last time I talked about the CIPD's new initiative called CATS, Critically Appraised Topics. Now, this initiative asks you, as an HR and learning professional, to identify areas where having access to a bit more research and some evidence based on things that actually happened and being studied would be really helpful to you. So you're invited to submit questions on topics where you'd like to know, what does the evidence really show? And I also mentioned that in the field of learning and development, we've a tendency not to appropriately reference the research which has preceded the work that we're doing. And sometimes those posting their own discoveries don't know what preceded their work. Sometimes it's because the research is considered just too old, as if humans have changed so much that anything discovered pre-Twitter is somehow suspect or even wrong. Sometimes it's because those wishing to promote themselves feel that their standing amongst their followers would be negatively affected if they were not the original creator of the findings they promote. This tendency to avoid appropriate citations is not only in the area of how we help people learn, but it also extends to what we help people learn. So just last week, a client contacted me and said that they were using a model based on situational leadership. And so I went back to the original Xeroxes of the leadership training materials I was given during courses that I'd completed when I first put in charge of a team. And I reread that material. And there it was credited to Blanchard and Hersey, as it should have been. The situational leadership model was already vintage when I first heard about it in the 80s. It was originally dated back to the 1960s, although to be fair, the name wasn't adopted until the 70s. But on the materials I was given access to last week, no such credit was given, no such citation was included, certainly no dates were attached, as if saying that it was that old, before the internet, would have been death to it, would have made people disregard it. I mean, for goodness sake, wasn't everything black and white then? Well, I remember that period, and trust me, most of it was black and white then, you're right. But even Blanchard and Hersey weren't squeaky clean in this regard, because in 1958 the Tannenbaum-Schmidt continuum was first published, and if you look it up, you'll find it bears an uncanny similarity to some of the key perspectives shared in situational leadership. And I don't think in the original situational leadership materials that I saw, Tannenbaum-Schmidt was ever referenced, which is a real shame because it gives you a different perspective, gives you a different insight into the work that Blanchard and Hersey did. So it's useful to get involved in what has come before, but maybe I'm wrong to be somewhat annoyed when thought leaders and learning visionaries clothe themselves in the stolen raiments of a previous age. Maybe it's always gone on. It was ever thus. But we live in the age of the internet. We've got more information available to us now than we've ever had in the history of humankind. And we can all check this stuff. And I think we have a responsibility, particularly if we're in the process of helping others to learn, to do some of that work. First of all, we should, chuck in the odd reference now and again, give a citation to the people who did the hard yards. But we should also be more assiduous in finding out for ourselves what the original research said, rather than just taking somebody else's interpretation of something that they've put on a SlideShare network. So let's think about what it is that we are helping people to learn and how we are doing that and what the research evidence actually says will work. And on that basis, I wish the CIPD CATS initiative great success. I think it's a really, really important thing. And the fact that they are using modern technology to kind of crowdsource some of these answers is brilliant. But if you do want more information about some of the practices that you've taken as read over the years, that you've been introduced to in the past, then post some questions to Johnny Gifford and the team over at the CIPD. Because evidence-based practice should be the absolute cornerstone of our work. And I urge everyone, check, reread, most importantly, give credit to those who did the hard yards of research in the first place. In the times when research meant something more than just putting a search into Google and uncritically accepting whatever popped up on page 1.
Studies have shown that learning programs are now crucial weapons in the fight to attract and retain talent. Working closely with modern learning organisations across the globe, we have developed Learning Programs of Excellence, a prestigious award recognising exceptional, state-of-the-art learning programs. If you're a learning department or function, LPE will help you attract new talent. You'll boost your appeal as an employer by showcasing the calibre of your learning programs and development opportunities within your organisation. If you're a provider of learning, LPE gives you an absolute guarantee that your learning programs are capable of creating a lasting positive effect on performance and business outcomes. Get in touch with the Learning and Performance Institute now and begin your Learning Programme of Excellence journey.
So I'm thrilled to have Christina Gadd in the studio. You mentioned in your last time here that you had a book coming, and guess what? We've got it. It's here, and we're going to talk about it. So welcome back to the studio, Christina.
Thanks very much. Thank you for inviting me again.
So how long has this been in the making?
It's probably been about 2 years, but I haven't been working on it solidly. It's been sort of, a week here, a week there. I find I work best in sort of chunks, so about 2 years though.
Great stuff. Now, I was digging around prior to this interview and noticed that you come from a non-L&D background. Tell us more, because for me that absolutely underpins why this is going to be a good read.
So my degree was in chemical engineering and fuel technology, and I was mentioning to you that as an engineer I would never have embarked on a project without knowing exactly what was coming out at the other end, down to the micron. And so it's always surprised me in learning development that people will jump into solution mode and they will come up with activities, they will come up with ways of doing things which are very creative, but not necessarily getting the evidence behind it to then justify those solutions.
Indeed. And the book is called How Not to Waste Your Money on Training. How did that come about?
Well, I was going to call it Needs Analysis for Learning and Development Professionals.
I'm glad you didn't.
No, I'm glad I didn't. I think it would have got quite dusty on a lot of shelves quite quickly. Somebody actually on social media suggested something similar, and so I thought, actually, that sounds better. And it's not just about training, it's that broader sort of aspect of learning and development, but it's also about really looking into what it is that the organisation needs, and it's also about the engagement bit that you have to do beforehand. So how do you make sure that the data that you're collecting is the right data? How do you know that you're focusing on the right thing? And so you have to find the right people to talk to. So it's about that as well. So there's quite a lot of background as well.
I thumbed through it. It's got some fantastic imagery in there. Did you do that yourself?
I did, yeah. I've always been a bit of a scribbler, but it's only been the last few years since I got my iPad that I started to do a lot more, and it's had such a great reception that I've done more and more. And I thought that, well, this book has got to have my illustrations in, because I didn't want it to be a typical textbook. And if I had a typical textbook title as well, people would go away from it.
There's tons of that already on the bookshelf.
Exactly. So I wanted something to draw people in, and I found that a lot of the graphics that I use do draw people in. And so we've also been sending the book out with parcels with stickers on and labelled "Send to this fabulous person" as well, which has been causing quite a lot of mirth around post offices around the country and around the world as well. So that's been good.
So, why? Why create this book? What did you feel was missing that you needed to write this?
So we work with a lot of trainers, learning development professionals, L&D managers, facilitators, subject matter experts. And I've always found them to be an incredibly creative and resourceful bunch of people. I think there's been a bit of a fear around the analysis bit beforehand, getting closer to the organisation, and it's the how bit. How do we do that? And people have been talking about learning analytics. People have been talking about data collection, and people want to do it. People want to do the evaluation bit, but if you haven't nailed down what it is that you're actually trying to solve, how do you then evaluate it as well? And that's the thing that's a bit of, the wrong way round. People want to do the evaluation, but if you're not doing the analysis before, then it makes it almost impossible, regardless of the model that you use.
Great. And, for me, we sometimes get caught up in the sort of the hype of, what's new, what's in vogue, mixed realities and whatever. But actually, this should be what we're focusing on. So we've got a steady ground on which to kind of build upon. So it's great that you're kind of pulling us back and making us have some focus.
It is a sort of back to basics almost. I have nothing against technology or the new and shiny stuff. I'm a bit of a geek. I used to be an IT trainer, so I am a bit of an IT geek. But I'm also really grounded in wanting to know what the organisation wants to get out of it, and making sure that something's business focused as well. As being learner-centred. And I love the creative stuff, don't get me wrong, so it's about getting that balance between let's focus on the business and the learners, and also let's make it creative and memorable as well. So the whole package, really.
So it's very clear that you want to help sort of bring along the learning industry. What sort of personally did you get out of writing the book itself?
Oh, gosh, that's a really good question. I haven't really thought about that. I think I got a real sense of satisfaction, actually. And it's funny because going back to my engineering brain, I started off the book, as I would pretty much any L&D projects that I do, with sort of like looking into, well, what is it that people really need, and talking to people about it. But then I set some really clear objectives for each chapter. So you'll see when you get the book, there's very clear objectives what people can achieve. And there are worksheets and activities in the back that they can do, which will help them achieve it. So it is completely achievable. It's not some sort of hairy-fairy sort of ideal. It's actually a very practical step-by-step. So I think a huge sense of satisfaction. When I actually got the book in my hands, that was quite a moment of pride, actually. It was, because I'd seen endless formats of it in Word or a PDF format. And when you actually physically see the book, it's quite different.
Great. I mean, it looks fabulous, by the way.
Thank you.
Where can people get their hands on it?
From our website at the moment. And so that's www.howtoacceleratelearning.co.uk.
Fabulous. Please carry on helping to bring the industry along, and it's been a pleasure talking to you, Christina.
And a pleasure talking to you as well, Barbara. Thank you.
Thank you. We're out of time, sadly. Time flies when you're having fun. Nigel, help us by telling us what upcoming events.
Well, we've got 3 good, interesting learning conferences coming up over the next 3 months. The first one is Learning Live in London in September, followed by World of Learning in Birmingham in October. And then if we jump west, it's Learning 19 in Orlando, Florida, towards the end of the year. All 3 worth visiting.
Great, thank you so much, and see you next month.